Hey everyone, welcome to Lead Off, a segment here on Athlete Allies YouTube and across our social media pages that aims to never bury the lead when talking about topics that matter the most. I'm joined today by AT and Hudson from the Athlete Ally team, and we're going to talk about two of the topics that have happened recently in sports in the news that we think you should care about, that we have an opinion on, and that matter to our work to make sport a more inclusive and equitable space. We're going to start today's conversation with news that the Premier League and the FA have ended their relationship with Stonewall, and some of the most significant pieces of programming from that being rainbow laces and the rainbow captain's armbands that we would see across competition. Hudson, to just kick off thinking more macro and contextualizing this, like we're a nonprofit that has a track record of partnering with different teams, leagues, and governing bodies on a number of different types of activations. What do you think is just the importance of partnerships like these and your overall reflections on what's happening?
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to contextualize the Rainbow Laces Stonewall partnership specifically. So, we've had Pride Nights, LGBTQ visibility in and around professional men's sports going back 20 plus years, right? Some have started even in the 90s. One of the challenges on any Pride celebration, at least in the men's leagues, is that oftentimes the visibility and support stops at the sidelines, right? Very rarely are you seeing male players show any acknowledgement that there are LGBTQ fans, that Pride Night is happening. It's a very rare thing in 2025, with the exception of Rainbow Laces. Rainbow Laces in the Premier League, you had the biggest, arguably some of the biggest athletes in the world wearing rainbow on their shoelaces, on their armbands. And, I think it's fair to say that you don't have another form of athlete visibility supporting the LGBTQ community in sport that rivals that level of support from that partnership. So the rollback of that support is really especially disappointing. It's especially disheartening because, it was kind of like one of one in a lot of ways, but it's also it's not surprising, right? I think that one of our big challenges in this work is always, and this is like for anybody who wants to do sports advocacy work, I think we oftentimes think that change comes from the top down, right? We say, oh, it's the owners, it's the managers, it's the coaches who are going to dictate the way that things go. And I think that more often than not, the change always happens from the bottom up. And what we're seeing now around Pride Nights is, and we've seen this for probably the last 10 years, a slow drip, drip, drip of players opting out of wearing a Pride jersey during warm-ups, not wanting to wear rainbow laces. And I think for a lot of leagues, there's a little bit of this like tug of war between, is it our responsibility to mandate what an athlete is wearing and doing to support a community that we care about? Or is it our responsibility to respect that athlete's autonomy and let them, step out if they want to do so? I'm somebody who definitely errs on the side of athlete autonomy. I think that, everybody has a right to express support for issues that they care about and to not express support for issues that they don't care about. I do think that we have not done as good a job as we should around what does a Pride Night mean? Right. I think that's one of the big things when I hear people say, oh, well, this goes against my religious beliefs. I'm like, well, a Pride Night isn't saying that you are condoning, I don't know, same-sex marriage or like, some of the biblical interpretations that might lead to a political opinion. In my opinion, it's like, I want LGBTQ fans to feel safe and valued while watching the team that they love. I want athletes to be able to play the game that they love without having to hide who they are, right? I don't think that either of those beliefs come in conflict with a person's politics or religion. But I don't think that sports as a whole has done much to articulate the frame around what is a Pride Night. And then the last point that I would just make is player visibility and rainbow laces is only one dimension of what visibility and representation can look like. I'm I always get really frustrated when a partnership goes from, 100% all the way down to 0%. I'm like, okay, I get it that like this political moment is a little bit more contentious and players are opting out. That doesn't mean that we have to pull the rug out from underneath something that is saving people's lives, changing sports culture, has significant meaning globally. Instead, shift that partnership with Stonewall to be about, I don't know, using more LGBTQ vendors or finding other ways of supporting and uplifting the LGBTQ community. Maybe you have a fan group that has a lot of LGBTQ people in it. Celebrate them, talk about them. You have an amazingly big media megaphone in the Premier League. You don't just have to use that on players. So I'm always disappointed when people take the easy route and say, "Peace, I'm out," because I think that that's lazy and ultimately does the most to ignore your values. I think that if you really do say that you care about the community, then we have to be able to still find ways of creating that visibility and that solidarity, even if we have to redirect the ways in which we're creating it.
I think the athlete autonomy piece is interesting and something to monitor. Also, kind of moving forward as this plays out, because there was some confusion initially when the announcement was made that the Premier League had banned rainbow laces or banned the rainbow captain's armband. And then you did have to come out and confirm, hey, no, we're not banning anything. This is really just about ending the partnership. But I'm curious to see and watch as this plays out is there still space for players who want to wear it to continue to do so? To just say, it's not something we're formally partnering in, but I believe in it. And I want to have the autonomy to be able to do it myself. So it'll be curious to me to see if we still do see any of that happening, just organically from the bottom up, for players that really do care. Hudson started to talk a little bit about visibility and representation. I think visible symbols, are at times nonverbal cues around spaces that are at least conscious of some of these things, about being inclusive for diverse communities. You're an educator who comes to this work through that lens. How do you think about this campaign, the ending of it, just the idea of the visibility and representation angle and what that means to this work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of research, right? Like that's already been done. I think of like the National Institutes of Health, GLSEN, American Psychological Association, Trevor Project, the CDC, et cetera. And I think sampling these communities, marginalized communities, and specifically LGBTQI plus, they've found that representation validates these like youth's identities. And so I'm speaking specifically in like the K through 12 arena, but it also fosters a sense of belonging and improving mental health, including a nearly 40% reduction in suicide attempts in affirming environments. That's important. Like that means a lot. Like these are lives, and for young people to ease that negative mental health impact by seeing and being in inclusive spaces. And then studies show that LGBTQI plus students report less harassment when schools include positive representations of the LGBTQ community. And I think what's important here is, as Hudson had said, like wearing a rainbow armband or uniform or shoelaces, one, it doesn't mean you're LGBTQI plus, right? Like I think there's a fear, which again is like a more of a maybe a reflection inward of what's going on. If you're afraid that you're going to be mistaken for someone who's LGBTQI plus, but allies wear rainbows to show that support. Teachers will wear that to let their students know, if you're sitting in fear, I'm someone you can come talk to, or that you are a valued person in this space, and I want you to succeed. It is a representation that all people are welcome. And I think the confusion is wearing a rainbow armband, as Hudson had mentioned, is like condoning like the identity. And I think that it's important to note that like wearing a representation or rainbow armband, shoelaces, whatever, it's like not going to make someone LGBTQI plus, right? That's not how identity works. Someone's not going to see a rainbow and then be zapped into being gay. But what that signals is that all are welcome in these spaces. And I think that part's the important piece is that again, going back to these studies, they found that students who are not LGBTQIA plus but saw inclusive policies, saw representation, they also felt safe. Because there's this sense of, if these folks who I know are marginalized, who are targeted in like society for who they are, if there's care and support for them, there's going to be care and support for me too. And I think that's the piece to me that's the most important of this, that you don't have to necessarily carry the flag and attend pride parades or to like identify as LGBTQI plus to say, everybody belongs. Sport is for everybody, and I would say that goes for other identities as well. And if it works, if this is the data we're getting for young people, there's no reason why that won't translate to adults in these like athletic spaces.
For sure. Hudson, does anything to add on to that?
I would just also put an add-on that the Premier League continues to struggle with racism. There's a lot of racial issues that continue to come up for Black players, and I think that if you're serious about creating a safe environment for players, for fans, for anybody who walks through those turnstiles, then I just for me you can't be against racial discrimination but not against LGBTQ discrimination, right? We have to be able to hold those two things in the same breath. And so I think just on my like appeal or call to action is really thinking intersectionally and holistically about harm, about visibility, about representation, and ultimately, what is the kind of experience you want players and fans to be having who are under your care? And if we know that there's a problem of racism, then there's probably other issues around homophobia, sexism, other forms of bias and bigotry. And so my hope is that, okay, again, let's just not go from 100% to 0%. Let's find that middle way, because we're not where we want to be in sports culture. I don't think that anybody would argue, oh, yes, we figured it out. The experience that we want of every player and every fan is perfect. It's not, and it's especially not for the LGBTQ community. So do better, do a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we could go much further in depth just on the challenges of racism in football globally. The European game has seen a surge, particularly in early competitions over the past few weeks alone, with players being targeted by fans and others. I love Wayne Rooney has a new podcast. He was talking on his podcast about the experience that he shared of a player who had been targeted with kind of racially abusive language, crying on his shoulder, and the allyship that the team tried to foster and cultivate following that. So there's a lot to talk about and be done just in transforming football culture, and seeing these types of partnerships and doesn't necessarily seem to be a step in the right direction. But we'll see how things happen.
One of the things that we often talk about in this work is, what is the level one allyship? What is step one, layer one? And for me, that's always do no harm, right? Like that's like the basic principle of like do no harm. And there's a lot of harm still happening on the fault lines of race, of gender, of ability, of so many different identities that people hold. There's harm that's being done. in our sports spaces. And so, yeah, I think I would hope for a more holistic embrace of how we do no harm for the people under our care.
Yeah. And